A long time ago, my mother told me that wealth is not determined by how much money you have, but by how you use it. I was too young to understand the depth of that thought. Now, at 67, those words have become my credo for life. Mornings at my house in the Hamptons start the same way. I wake up at 5 a.m., exercise, make myself some oatmeal, and read the latest economic news. Many people wonder why I, a simple retiree, as I'm often called, would follow the market. If only they knew. I am adjusting a cardigan made of fine wool, simple, but of high quality. Our family has always valued practicality and reasonable economy. That's what my parents taught me when they went through hard times. This habit has stayed with me all my life, even when my business with Owen started making millions. Owen. It's been 7 years since he's been with me, but I still occasionally turn around to share news with him. We met in college. I studied chemistry. He studied business. No one believed anything good would come out of that union. No one but us. EcoClean was born in our garage when I developed a formula for an eco-friendly dishwashing detergent. Owen saw the potential and convinced me to try and sell our invention. At first, we bottled the product ourselves, labeled it, and distributed it to local stores. Then came the first employees, a small workshop and office. 20 years later, EcoClean was the leader in environmentally friendly household chemicals on the East Coast. When Owen died of a heart attack, many people expected me to sell the company. After all, what does a housewife who created a successful formula understand about business? What they didn't know was that during our years of marriage, I had learned every aspect of running a company as well as my husband. I just preferred to stay in the shadows, to develop new products. That was our secret with Owen. I was always more than just a chemist's wife. I decided to remain the owner of the company, but not to publicize it. I hired a public director, the charismatic Reed Brooks, who became the face of EcoClean, while I continued to make all the key decisions. It was easier that way. No outside attention or expectations. Besides, I've never been a fan of publicity. I get up from my chair and walk to the window. Behind it is a well-kept but modest garden. No fancy sculptures or exotic plants, just neat beds of herbs that I use to experiment with natural flavorings, and an old apple tree that Owen had planted. You can't see the ocean from here, even though it's only a 15-minute walk. My house is not like the mansions of many Hamptonians. I could buy any of them, but why? 3 bedrooms are more than enough for a single woman, and I don't need huge halls and swimming pools. I prefer to invest my money in research and charity discreetly through anonymous foundations. My car is a reliable sedan, 8 years old. Not rusty, not dented, just inconspicuous. It gets me from point A to point B just fine. That's all I need. This simplicity of life is a conscious choice, not a necessity. But the only person who seems to have a hard time understanding it is my own son. Perry was born when our business was already 10 years old. Owen and I provided everything he needed, but we didn't spoil him. He graduated from a prestigious high school, then graduated from Yale with a degree in economics. We were proud of him. He was smart, driven, and seemed to share our values. That all changed after Owen died. No, Perry didn't become a bad person. He just, changed. He got a job at an investment firm, started surrounding himself with the right people, bought a house way beyond his means. And then he met Iris. Her first impression wasn't bad. Smart, educated, ambitious, but she was too fond of showing off her status through expensive things. I put it down to her youth. We all go through a phase where we care what others think of us. Their wedding 3 years ago was like a Hollywood premiere. 700 guests, many of whom they barely knew. 5 course changes. Champagne that cost as much as a small car. I sat at the head table and thought, is this really what my son wanted? After I got married, Perry visited me less and less. Our meetings became a formality. A lunch once a month, the usual holiday greetings. And when he did come, he was always talking about how I should update my closet, move to a more upscale neighborhood, finally start using Owen's money. Mom, you don't have to live so frugal, he said on his last visit. You have enough money to afford so much more. Why would I need more? I asked. I've got a roof over my head, food on the table, and something I love to do. You sound like you live in poverty. Poverty and prudent frugality are different things, Perry. I don't buy things I don't need. There's no shame in that. You're just, he hesitated for words. You don't look like the widow of a successful businessman. What am I supposed to look like? He didn't answer, only sighed with that peculiar intonation that children use when they think their parents are hopelessly out of touch. About a year ago, Iris started looking for a job. Before that, she had been developing her personal brand by maintaining social media pages, attending social events, and spending Perry's money on designer clothes. Now she wanted to realize her potential. Ironically, she took a job at EcoClean as marketing director. Of course, she didn't know about my connection to the company. No one did except Reed and a few other old co-workers. To her, I was just an old-fashioned mother-in-law who spent her days inexplicably. Reed called me right after her interview. "Beatrice, you won't believe who's here to see us." He sounded puzzled. "Your sister-in-law." She impressed our HR director with her marketing strategy presentation. "Did she recognize you?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "No, we've never met. She doesn't even know I know you." "What are we going to do?" I wondered. Turning her down would be suspicious. Her resume and skills matched the position. Besides, Perry might get suspicious. "Hire her," I said, "but keep me posted on her work." "Are you sure? What if she finds out?" "If she does her job well, she won't find out. I rarely show up at the main office, and when I do come to the lab, I'm known as a consultant, not the owner." That's how Iris became an EcoClean employee, with a high salary, a personal assistant, and an office overlooking the bay. Now she bragged even more about her accomplishments and was even more dismissive of me. Perry once blurted out that she called me a museum piece behind my eyes. To be honest, it didn't really bother me. I'd lived long enough to know that the opinion of someone who judged others by the value of their clothes wasn't worth much. But my son's attitude, it hurt. He called less and less often, and when we did meet, he looked at me with a mixture of embarrassment and pity. Today, as I was getting ready to go to my lab, I got a text from him. "Mom, come over for dinner at 7 o'clock tonight. Iris and I want to share the news." I replied in agreement, wondering what that news might be. A pregnancy? A move? Perry's new job? I spent the day developing a new line of laundry products, fully immersed in my work. I love my lab, a quiet place where I can create without administrative distractions. Most EcoClean employees don't know who I am. To them, I'm just B, an elderly female consultant who occasionally drops by and gives valuable advice. In the evening, after changing into a simple but elegant dress and wearing a string of pearls, Owen's 20th wedding anniversary gift, I went to my son's house. His house was in the most prestigious part of Hampton. 3 stories, 6 bedrooms, a swimming pool, a tennis court, a dock for the yacht they didn't have yet, but they were working on it. As I drove up to the gate, I couldn't help but wonder how it was that my son, raised to be practical and prudent, had turned into someone who cared so much about the trappings of wealth. Maybe Owen and I were pushing him too hard? Or, on the contrary, not explaining our principles enough? The guard at the entrance looked questioningly at my car, but when he recognized me, he opened the gate. Several expensive cars were already parked in the driveway, so there would be guests. Perry hadn't warned me about this, but I'd stopped being surprised by such little things long ago. The doorbell rings, and I'm greeted by the maid, a taciturn woman from Central America who's been working for them for 2 years. She takes my scarf and escorts me into the living room, where about 10 people are already gathered, all young, all dressed as if they've stepped off the covers of fashion magazines. I look for my son and find him at the bar, talking animatedly with a man in a suit that probably cost the average worker a month's salary. Next to them is Iris, radiant in an open-back dress. Around her neck is a diamond necklace that I'm sure they can't afford. Perry notices me and waves awkwardly. He says something to Iris and she turns around. A grimace of annoyance appears on her face for a moment, which she immediately masks with a fake smile. "Beatrice!" she exclaims with feigned enthusiasm. "How nice of you to be able to come." Although I'm no expert on social manners, even I realize that when a daughter-in-law addresses her mother-in-law by her first name, it's not a sign of respect, especially among her friends, but I don't let it get to me. "Hello, Iris. Perry wrote that you have news." I can't help but notice her exchanging quick glances with her son, as if they didn't expect me to get right to the point. Yes, but more on that later. She takes me by the arm and leads me toward the group of guests. Let me introduce you to my, mother-in-law. The way she says the word mother-in-law with a slight hesitation says more than 1,000 words. I become the object of polite nods and superficial smiles. No one is interested in who I am or what I do. To them, I'm just an elderly relative who was invited out of courtesy. I notice one of the young women looking appraisingly at my dress and then leaning over to her neighbor and whispering something. Both laugh quietly. Once upon a time, this would have hurt me, but now I only note the fact with a slight sadness. Youth passes so quickly, and with it this need to judge others by their clothes. The evening continues, and with each passing minute, I feel more and more out of place. Conversations revolve around the latest purchases, fancy restaurants, and gossip about people I don't know. Iris glares, Perry chimes in, and I'm just watching my son turn into someone I barely recognize. The invitation from Perry took me by surprise. Usually our family reunions were planned at least a week in advance. And here was a sudden message on my phone, sent at 10 in the morning. Mom, come over for dinner tonight at 7 o'clock. Iris and I want to share the news. I stirred, wondering what the news might be. A pregnancy? A new job? Did they finally buy the yacht Iris had been talking about for 2 years? Seemed like happy events, but for some reason a vague uneasiness lingered in my mind. Determined not to come empty-handed, I stopped on the way to visit a little pastry shop that Owen and I had discovered years ago. They make an amazing almond cake from an old-fashioned recipe. It's not as fancy and expensive as the cakes from the fancy French bakery Iris favors, but it's authentic, with natural ingredients and love in every bite. As I pulled up to my son's house, I was once again struck by its size. The huge 3-story neo-colonial mansion, with its white columns and immaculately trimmed bushes along the driveway, seemed too big for a young couple without children. However, Iris always said, "You have to live large if you want to be taken seriously." In the driveway, I noticed several unfamiliar premium cars, so there would be guests. Perry hadn't warned me about this, but I'd long since gotten used to such surprises. The door was opened by Lupita, their housekeeper, a middle-aged woman from Mexico with tired eyes and calloused hands. She smiled faintly as she recognized me. "Good evening, Ms. Beatriz. Come on in. They're in the living room." I handed her the cake, asking her to take it to the kitchen, and walked into the house. There were loud voices and laughter coming from the living room. I paused for a moment, gathering my thoughts. Social events had never been my thing. Owen usually took on the role of sociable host while I found a quiet corner where I could have a heart-to-heart talk with one or two guests. Taking a deep breath, I entered the living room. The space, which could easily hold the entire first floor of my house, was filled with people all young, stylishly dressed, champagne glasses in hand. Most of them I was seeing for the first time. The luxury of the living room was breathtaking. A crystal chandelier that must have cost as much as a middle-class car. Antique furniture on which it seemed no one had ever sat. Paintings by modern artists in heavy gilded frames. It all screamed money, but somehow it made it feel like a showroom rather than a real home. Perry spotted me first. He was standing at the bar talking to two men, and when he saw me, he froze for a moment. Then, apologizing to the two men, he headed in my direction. "Mom," he kissed me on the cheek, "I'm glad you could come." "I didn't know there would be guests," I said quietly. "It's just a few of Iris's friends and coworkers." He shrugged. "She wanted to celebrate her promotion." "A promotion?" I asked in surprise. "To Echo Clean? But she just recently—" Yeah, she's in charge of the entire marketing department now." Perry interrupted me. "Can you believe it? In such a short period of time?" I was stunned. Reed hadn't told me anything about Iris's promotion. Of course, I didn't interfere with the day-to-day running of the company, but I was usually the one to make such decisions. "Congratulations," I said, trying to hide my confusion. "It's unexpected." "She's amazing," Perry sounded proud. "Everyone at the company loves her." I doubted it, but I didn't say anything. At that moment, Iris came sailing toward us, gliding across the floor in her champagne-colored silk dress, which I was sure cost at least a couple of thousand. "Beatrice!" she exclaimed with feigned enthusiasm. hugging me as gently as if she were afraid of getting dirty. "How nice of you to come." She smelled of expensive perfume, too much for my taste. A diamond necklace sparkled around her neck, which I was sure they couldn't afford. "I heard about your promotion," I said. "Congratulations." "Oh, it's unbelievable." She waved her arms theatrically. "I've implemented a new marketing strategy and sales are up 30% for the quarter." The CEO personally asked me to head up the department. I could hardly resist correcting her. Sales had indeed increased, but because of the new product line I'd developed, not her marketing ploys. But this wasn't the time or place for that kind of talk. "Come on, I'll introduce you to my friends." Iris took me by the arm and led me toward a group of young people. The next half hour passed in superficial conversations with people who looked through me. I was invisible to them, an elderly relative who had been invited as a courtesy. No one was interested in who I was or what I did. Iris introduced me simply as Perry's mother, without even mentioning my name. Finally, Lupita announced that dinner was served and everyone headed into the dining room. The long table was set with royal proportions: silverware, crystal glasses, porcelain plates with a gold border. In the center were fresh flowers in a vase that I knew Iris had bought at auction for enough to feed a small family for a year. I was seated at the far end of the table, next to an older man who turned out to be the father of one of Iris's friends. He turned out to be a good conversationalist, a retired engineer with a passion for ornithology. We even found common ground, discussing the various species of birds around Hampton. But our conversation was interrupted by the clinking of glasses. Iris had attracted the attention of the guests. "Dear friends," she said brightly, standing next to Perry. "Thank you for sharing this special evening with us. As you know, I've recently been promoted at EcoClean. I am now in charge of the entire marketing department." There was applause and cheers of approval. I clapped along with everyone else as I watched my son look at his wife with adoration. "But that's not all the news," Iris continued, her voice even more enthusiastic. "Perry and I have decided it's time to move to a house more suited to our status." A whisper of surprise swept across the table. A house more in keeping with their status? This mansion was already one of the most impressive in the neighborhood. "We've signed a contract to buy an oceanfront villa," Perry announced, his voice shaking with excitement. "With its own beach and a dock for a yacht, which we also plan to have by next summer." I couldn't believe my ears. Where did they get the money for such a property? Even with Iris's promotion, their combined income couldn't cover such expenses. Unless... "What about this house?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Oh, we're selling it, of course," Perry answered. "It's not enough to cover the entire cost of the new villa, though. But the bank has offered us a great deal on a mortgage." Mortgage. More debt when they can barely keep up with the current payments. I felt a lump of anxiety rising in my throat. "Perry, are you sure this is a wise decision?" I asked quietly, hoping the other guests wouldn't hear. "In the current economic climate, to make such a commitment?" "Mom," my son interrupted me with a nervous chuckle. "Let's not do this now." But Iris heard. Her smile became strained and her eyes narrowed. "Beatrice," she said loudly, drawing the attention of all the guests, "not everyone lives by the principle of economy above all else. Some of us know how to enjoy life and what we've earned." "I was just going to say," I began, but she interrupted me again. "You know," Iris turned to the guests, "my mother-in-law thinks we should live like the Great Depression is coming tomorrow. Wear clothes until they fall apart, drive a car until the engine falls out, and save money on everything, even when we don't need it." A chuckle ran across the table. I felt the color flood my face. "Iris, the way I meant," I said, trying to stay calm. "It's just not a good time to make a big purchase like this. The real estate market is unstable, interest rates are rising." "Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot I was talking to a financial expert." Iris rolled her eyes. "A woman who had been a housewife all her life and still bought groceries at a discount." There was an awkward silence. The guests looked at Iris and me, clearly unsure of how to react. Perry looked like he wanted to fall through the ground. "I'm just worried about you," I said quietly. "I don't want you to get into financial trouble." Iris laughed cold and unpleasant. "Financial trouble? Us? Beatrice, not everyone lives like a pauper. Perry and I have wonderful careers and bright futures. We deserve to live beautifully. Prudence and poverty are different things, I replied, feeling my voice tremble. And no one deserves to live in debt. Oh my God, Iris theatrically splayed her hands. Can you hear her? She's talking about debt at a holiday dinner. Perry, honey, she turned to my son. Maybe you should walk your mother home. She's clearly not in the mood to celebrate our success. Perry looked stunned, torn between his wife and his mother. Mom, he began uncertainly. Maybe now really isn't the time. But Iris didn't let him finish. Seriously, get her out of here, she exclaimed, and her voice became harsh. She's ruining the whole evening with her outdated views. She's not elite like us. She doesn't understand how successful people live in the 21st century. I sat as if pinned to my chair, unable to believe my ears. My daughter-in-law had just called me a beggar and demanded that I be kicked out of my own son's house. And worst of all, Perry was silent, not defending me. Don't worry, I said, getting up from the table. I'll find my own way out. I put my napkin down next to the untouched plate and headed out of the dining room. No one stopped me or said a word. Only my table neighbor, an elderly engineer, threw a sympathetic glance at me. In the hallway, I ran into Lupita, who had just brought a tray of desserts out of the kitchen. Are you leaving, Miss Beatrice? She asked in surprise. Yes, Lupita, I have to go. But what about your cake? I sliced it for dessert. I don't think they'll like it, I grinned bitterly. It's too simple for the elite. Elite? She gave me a confused look, but then nodded and went back into the kitchen. I grabbed my bag and scarf and went outside. The evening air was cool and fresh after the stuffy atmosphere at home. Getting into the car, I didn't start the engine right away. I needed time to realize what had happened. I had just been publicly humiliated in front of strangers. I had been called a beggar. I'd been kicked out of my house like an unwanted guest. And my son hadn't said a word in my defense. Turning on the ignition, I slowly pulled onto the road. Iris's words rattled around in my head. She's not elite like us. Elite. What a ridiculous word. The real elite aren't the ones who buy houses and yachts they can't afford. It's not those who humiliate others to make themselves feel better. On the drive home, I couldn't stop thinking about Perry and Iris driving themselves into a debt hole that would be hard to get out of. A new house, a yacht, endless parties, all of it requires money they don't have. And Iris's brilliant career at EcoClean. She doesn't even realize she works for a company owned by her penniless mother-in-law. That thought made me stop. I parked on the curb and stared at the dark road in front of me. Iris works for my company. I'm her boss, and she just called me a beggar, unworthy of sitting at the same table with her and her friends. What would Owen do in that situation? He's always been more pragmatic than me. Don't make business decisions on emotion, he used to say. But this isn't just a business. This is my son, my family. I pulled out my phone and dialed Reed's number. He answered after the third ring. Beatrice, is something wrong? Reed, I said, and my voice sounded calmer than I expected. We need to talk about reorganizing the marketing department. Now? He sounded surprised. It's almost 10 o'clock at night. Tomorrow, first thing, I replied. One more thing. Do you know anything about Iris Harlow's promotion? Promotion? His surprise was genuine. There was no promotion. We were even discussing whether to extend her probation. Her last campaign was, let's just say it wasn't very successful, so Iris lied. Not just to me, but to all of her guests. And Perry seemed to support that lie. Thank you, Reed. I'll see you at the office tomorrow. I hung up the phone and sat in silence for a few minutes. Then I started the car and drove home, knowing exactly what I had to do. Iris called me a beggar and demanded that I be removed because I'm not elite. Well, tomorrow she'll find out how wrong she was, and it'll be a lesson she'll never forget. It was a cloudy morning, but my mind was unexpectedly clear. I woke up earlier than usual at 4 in the morning and couldn't go back to sleep. The events of last night played over and over in my head like a broken record. Get her out of here. She's not an elite like us. Iris's words cut into me with sharp barbs, but strangely, instead of pain, I felt determination. Over a cup of strong tea, I mentally mapped out a plan of action. Normally, I preferred not to get involved in the day-to-day running of the company, trusting Reed to do so. But today was to be an exception. At 6:30, I was on my way to EcoClean's main office. The glass and eco-friendly building stood tall in the business district of Hampton, modern but not garish, exactly like our products. I parked in my usual spot, marked by a modest, reserved for BH sign, which most employees thought was an acronym for some obscure job title. The guard at the entrance, an older man named Ted, who had been with the company since its inception, smiled at me. "Good morning, Mrs. Harlow. You're early today." "Good morning, Ted. Yes, a lot of work. Minus Mr. Brooks is here. Came in about 20 minutes ago." Didn't surprise me. Reed's always been a workaholic, just like Owen was in his day. I took the elevator to the top floor where the top management offices were located. Most of the offices were still empty. The workday started at 9. Reed's secretary, a young woman named Veronica, raised her eyebrows in surprise when she saw me. "Good morning, Mrs. Harlow. Mr. Brooks is in his office. Shall I announce you?" "No need, dear. He's waiting for me." Reed was sitting at his desk, absorbed in some papers. When he saw me, he rose immediately. "Beatrice, I didn't expect you so early." "I couldn't sleep," I admitted, taking the chair opposite him. "Too many thoughts." Reed looked at me carefully. We'd known each other for over 20 years. He'd joined the company as a young man, and Owen and I had recognized his potential. "Is this about your sister-in-law?" he asked cautiously. "Yes. Yesterday there was unpleasant incident." I paused, searching for words. Iris had invited me to dinner, where she had gathered her friends to celebrate her alleged promotion to EcoClean. When I allowed myself to question the reasonableness of her and Perry's financial decisions, she publicly called me a beggar and demanded I be removed from the table because I was not elite. Reed whistled. "And what? Perry let her talk to you like that?" He didn't say a word. I tried to keep my voice steady, but I couldn't hide my bitterness. He just stood there with a guilty look on his face. "Beatrice, I'm so sorry," I said. "Don't be." I held up my hand, stopping him. "I'm not here for sympathy. I want to talk about the reorganization of the marketing department." Reed straightened up, switching to business mode. "I'm listening." "How long have we had a product testing department in operation?" "About 5 years, since we decided to expand the line to include skincare products." "And I understand it's a bit short-handed at the moment?" "Yes, we're having trouble finding people with the right qualifications who are willing to work with chemicals. The salaries are higher than in other departments, but the conditions, I'm transferring Iris Harlow from marketing to testing," I said firmly. "Immediately." Reed looked at me with a puzzled expression. "Beatrice, are you sure? She has no relevant education or experience." "Oh, she has a master's degree in chemistry," I replied. "She got it before she decided that marketing was more prestigious. It was in the fine print on her resume. As I recall, she even worked in a lab at a pharmaceutical company for the first 2 years after college." "Okay," Reed nodded, making notes in his notebook. "What else?" "Cancel all her corporate perks. No company car, no corporate credit card, standard health insurance, no extras. And of course, she'll no longer need her personal assistant." "What about the paycheck?" I've been thinking. "A pay cut could give Iris legal recourse." "Besides, the testing department did offer higher rates because of the harsh working conditions." "Leave it as it is, but no bonuses." Reed continued to take notes, then looked up at me. "Beatrice, do you realize she'll probably file a complaint? Maybe even take her to court for illegal transfer." "Let her try." I allowed myself a slight smile. "We have enough documents proving her incompetence in her current position. Besides, there is a clause in her contract about her possible transfer to other departments if necessary. Our legal department has it covered." "One last thing," I added, standing up. "I want to personally inform her of the transfer, today." Reed looked concerned. "Are you sure that's wise? Maybe it's better if I—" "No," I said firmly. "I should do it. Have the necessary paperwork ready by 9:30. Is that when she usually gets here?" "Usually later." Reed rolled his eyes. "But today she has a presentation for clients at 10, so she should be on time." "That's great. I'll meet her in the conference room on the 4th floor, and get Helen from HR down there too. She needs to be there for the conversation." After leaving Reed's office, I went down to the cafeteria for more coffee. I needed to gather my thoughts for the upcoming conversation. I knew I was acting on emotion, something I'd always tried to avoid in business. But sometimes even the most rational decisions have emotional underpinnings. Maybe this transfer would actually be good for Iris. Working with real products, rather than glossy presentations and marketing slogans, could teach her something important, like respect for the people who created the things she loved to sell. At 9:25, I was already sitting in the conference room. Reed had brought in all the necessary paperwork, and Helen, the taciturn, middle-aged woman who headed human resources, took the seat next to me. "Mrs. Harlow," she said quietly, "are you sure this transfer is necessary? Mrs. Harlow, Jr. might take it as a—" "As what?" I asked calmly. "As a personal vendetta," Helen finished. "Do you have any doubts about my objectivity, Helen?" She shook her head. "No, but the situation is unusual. Don't worry. I'm fully aware of what I'm doing." At 9:35, the conference room door swung open and Iris walked in. She looked as impeccable as ever, perfectly styled designer suit, high-heeled shoes that clattered across the floor like a metronome. In her hands, a clipboard and a folder with the EcoClean logo on it. When she saw me, she froze for a moment, but quickly pulled herself together. "Beatrice, what are you doing here?" she asked with feigned surprise. "I have an important presentation in 25 minutes. "Sit down, Iris," I said, pointing to the chair across from me. "It won't take long." She lowered herself into the chair uncertainly, shifting her gaze from me to Reed, then to Helen. "What's the matter?" "Mr. Brooks, if this is about work, why is my mother-in-law here?" Reed opened his mouth, but I beat him to it. "Because I'm not just your mother-in-law, Iris. I'm the owner of EcoClean." Iris stared at me as if I'd just announced that I'd come from Mars. Her mouth dropped open, but no sound came out. "What kind of joke is this?" she finally squeezed out. "It's not a joke," Reed replied calmly. "Mrs. Harlow founded this company with her late husband over 30 years ago. She is still the sole owner and chairman of the board of directors." Iris turned pale. Her gaze darted between the three of us, as if she were looking for confirmation that this was a prank. But why didn't you tell me? Why didn't Perry tell me?" "Perry doesn't know," I answered. "In fact, he only knows that the company was founded by his father. He was never interested in the details of the ownership after Owen died, assumed I'd sold my share." That was true. My son never asked me about the company directly. He just made a convenient assumption, and I was in no hurry to dissuade him. "But that's impossible." Iris was still trying to make sense of it. "You live in an ordinary house, drive an old car. You don't even have a housekeeper." "I have an au pair twice a week," I corrected her. "That's enough for a single woman with a small house. I prefer to invest in company development and charity, not in ostentatious luxuries." Iris looked like she'd been hit over the head. She was clearly trying to reconcile the image of a penniless mother-in-law with the reality of a multi-million-dollar business owner. "Why are you telling me this?" she finally asked. "Why now?" "Because as of today, you're being transferred from the marketing department to the product testing department." I slid a folder of documents over to her. "This is your new contract. The terms are basically the same, except for a few points that Helen will explain to you." Iris stared at the folder like a poisonous snake. "What? But I'm the marketing director. I can't—" "You're not the marketing director," Reed interrupted her. "You're a probationary junior marketer. And frankly, your last campaign didn't impress management." "But yesterday, at dinner," Iris stammered, suddenly realizing her lie had been exposed. "Yes, we all know about your promotion," I said dryly. "That's an impressive story. Too bad it has nothing to do with reality." Iris blushed, then paled, then blushed again. Her hands clenched into fists. "You can't do this to me," she hissed. "I'll sue you for discrimination, for harassment, for what exactly?" Helen asked calmly. "The company is offering you a position commensurate with your background in chemistry. With your current salary, despite your lack of experience in your new role, legally it's a perfectly valid transfer. Plus," Reed added, "there's a clause in your contract that says you can transfer to other departments as needed, and we're short on qualified employees in the testing department." Iris was silent for a moment, clearly considering her options. Then she turned to me, and a calculating glint appeared in her eyes. "This is revenge, isn't it? For last night. For what I said. I looked her straight in the eye. It's a business decision, Iris. You're not doing well in marketing, but you have potential in another area. The company is giving you a chance to prove yourself where your skills will be more valuable. Don't pretend, she snapped back. You want to humiliate me? Make me work in the lab like some kind of lab technician. Lab technicians do important work, I pointed out. Without them, none of our products would exist, including the ones you're so fond of advertising without understanding how they're made. Iris glared at me with a look of hatred. Then she abruptly grabbed the file folder and stood up. Perry's going to find out about this, she said. He won't let you treat me like this. Sure, tell Perry, I nodded. I'm sure he'll be interested in your promotion and in your plans for a villa with its own beach, which you can't afford. And of course, about how you called his mother a beggar in front of all your friends. Iris turned white. Obviously, she hadn't told her husband about the details of yesterday's incident. You'll regret it, she said, heading for the door. I'll find a way. Iris, Helen stopped her. Your new department is on the second floor, East Wing. You'll need to turn in your pass from the marketing office and get a new one. Your personal belongings will be delivered to your new workplace by lunchtime. Iris froze at the door, her shoulders slumped. Then she turned around abruptly. Oh, and one more thing, I added. Your presentation to the clients is canceled. Eric Jenkins will handle it. He's already been briefed. That was the last straw. Iris stormed out of the conference room, slamming the door loudly. The three of us were left to sit in silence. Helen was the first to break the silence. Well, that went interesting. Reed hummed softly. Beatrice, are you sure this is the right decision? She's still your daughter-in-law after all, and your son's wife. I sighed. You know, Reed, sometimes people need a good lesson. Iris has lived too long in a world where everything revolves around her, where status and appearance trumps actual achievement. Maybe working in the lab will teach her to appreciate the things that really matter. Like not calling people beggars? Helen asked with a slight smile. For example, I nodded. Before I could get back to my lab, the phone rang. Perry's number. I took a deep breath and answered it. Yes, son. Mom. He sounded both outraged and confused. What's going on? Iris just called me hysterical, saying you've been put on the board of directors of EcoClean and you're using your influence to bully her. So she didn't tell him the whole truth. Interesting. Perry, Iris didn't accurately describe the situation, I replied calmly. I'm not put on the board of directors. I own this company, completely. There was a long pause. I could almost physically feel the gears in my son's head trying to make sense of this information. What? He finally said. You own EcoClean? But how? I thought you sold all the shares after Dad died. I never said I sold the company, Perry. You just assumed it and never asked. But, why didn't you tell me? There was resentment in his voice. Why did you keep it a secret? Why would I tell you? I asked. You were never interested in my father's business. You always thought his success was an accident, not the result of hard work. And you certainly never recognized my role in building the company. That's not fair, Mom. I've always respected what Daddy built. Not just Dad, Perry. I developed the formulas for all the major products. I created the technology on which the entire business is built. Your father and I were partners in everything. Silence again. I could practically see him trying to reconcile the image of his old-fashioned mother with the reality of a successful businesswoman. Okay, but why put Iris in this, testing department? He finally asks. She says you're doing it out of spite because of some fight. You call it a fight when your wife publicly humiliated me, called me a beggar, and demanded that I be kicked out of the table because I'm not elite? My voice remained calm, but Perry must have heard a note of steel in it. What? You were there, Perry. You heard everything, and you didn't say a word in my defense. Mom, I didn't think she meant it. It was just an emotional moment. Emotional moment, I said again. I wonder how you would feel if someone called you a beggar in front of all your coworkers. He didn't answer. I continued. Iris's transfer to the testing department isn't revenge, Perry. It's a chance for her to learn how the business really works, how the products she's so fond of promoting are made, Plus, she has a chemistry degree she's never used. She might find that she even likes this job. She'll never accept a job in a laboratory, exclaimed Perry. You know how much she values her image? She has a choice, I said. She can accept the new position or she can quit. The decision is hers. Mom, please, he sounded pleading. Cancel this transfer. I'm sure Iris regrets what she said. She just didn't know. She didn't know I was rich? And that justifies the way she treated me? I paused. Perry, it's about respect. It's about how we treat people, no matter what their financial situation is. I understand that, but my decision is final, I said firmly. Iris will work in the testing department. If she performs well, we can discuss other options in 6 months. Perry sighed as desperately as if I'd just announced the end of the world. You have no idea what my life is going to be like now, he muttered. Maybe, I agreed. But remember that none of this started on my initiative. And by the way, I added before I hung up, congratulations on Iris's promotion, which no one in the company knew about, and on the plans for the villa with its own beach that you can't afford. We definitely need to talk about your finances, son. I ended the call feeling a strange mixture of sadness and satisfaction. The deed was done. Iris had gotten her first lesson, but I realized it was just the beginning. She wasn't the type to give up easily or admit her mistakes. Well, we'll see how she does in the lab. Maybe it'll be a learning experience for her. Or maybe she'll just quit and the problem will resolve itself. Either way, today was just the first step. And something told me there was more to come. It's been a week since Iris was transferred to the testing department. Every morning I came to the company a little earlier than usual to check on things. Reed gave regular reports on the situation, but I wanted to see for myself. Iris hadn't quit, as I'd secretly expected. Instead, she'd accepted a new position, but apparently she wasn't going to give up without a fight. On her first day, she showed up at the lab in a designer suit and high-heeled shoes, completely inappropriate for working with chemicals. The department head, Dr. Irma Page, immediately sent her to change into standard protective clothing. She looked at the jumpsuit like it was a body bag, Irma told me, barely containing her laughter. She asked if we had a version from some famous designer. On Friday, Helen from HR came into my office with a worried look on her face. Mrs. Harlow, we have a problem, she said, taking a seat across from me. Iris has made a formal complaint of discrimination and harassment. I nodded, not the least bit surprised. It was expected. What's in her complaint? She claims the transfer was out of personal animosity, not business reasons. She wants reinstatement in the marketing department and compensation for emotional distress. Helen, we both know we're legally clean. There's a transfer clause in her contract. She's qualified for the new position, and her salary's the same. Yeah, but she's brought in a lawyer, a pretty big name, Elliot Branson. The name didn't ring a bell, but from the look on Helen's face, I knew it was serious. What's this Branson guy famous for? He specializes in corporate disputes and has a reputation for turning the simplest case into a media scandal. He uses the press, social media, anything to put pressure on a company. It got me thinking. EcoClean's reputation was one of our most valuable assets. We positioned ourselves as an ethical, family-owned company that cared about the environment and its employees. Well, bring in our legal counsel, I finally said. Let's see what he has to say. An hour later, a small crisis committee met in my office. Reed, Helen, our general counsel, Jonathan Higgins, and me. After discussing the situation, we concluded that legally, we were protected, but a public scandal could damage the company's image. No, I said firmly in response to the offer to compromise. It would set a dangerous precedent. Any employee unhappy with the transfer would threaten us with a lawsuit and a media scandal. We'll go strictly by the book, I've decided. Jonathan, prepare a detailed response to all of Iris's allegations. Helen, gather feedback on her work in marketing. I'm sure there's plenty to criticize. Reed, talk to Irma. How's Iris doing in the lab? If it's bad, document it. The team went off to run errands, and I was left alone, pondering the situation. It wasn't so much the legal standoff with Iris that bothered me, but her influence on Perry. He had called me several times that week, begging me to reconsider, saying that Iris was intolerable at home and that it was ruining their marriage. I decided it was time to address my son's financial situation. Judging by their lifestyle and plans for a new villa, they were spending far more than they could afford. How long had this been going on, and how deep is this rabbit hole? I called my financial advisor, with whom I had worked for years. Michael, I need your help. It's about my son. What's wrong, Beatrice? I suspect that Perry and his wife are in serious financial trouble. I need to know how bad it is. That's a delicate matter. I can't access his accounts without his consent. I understand that. But there are some things that are public record, right? Mortgages, property taxes, lawsuits. Michael was quiet for a moment. Yeah, it's possible. It's not exactly ethical, though. Michael, I'm worried about my son. I'm not going to use this information against him. On the contrary, I want to help if he's in trouble. The financier sighed. All right, Beatrice. I'll see what I can do. Give me a couple of days. The next morning, something unexpected happened. I received a call from Hugh Carlisle, president of the Hampton Chamber of Commerce and a longtime friend of our family. Beatrice, dear, I hope you're well. His voice sounded concerned. I'm fine, Hugh. Has something happened? Well, it's rather strange. I got a call from your sister-in-law, Iris. She says she works at EcoClean and she's having some sort of conflict with the management. She asked me to talk to the CEO. I could barely contain my laughter. And what did you tell her? I told her I'd think about it. I know that EcoClean is your company, even though you don't publicize it. I thought I'd give you a call first. Thanks, Hugh. It's a family matter, a bit complicated. Iris didn't know I owned the company when she applied for the job. Oh, awkward situation, Hugh chuckled. Well, I'll tell her I can't get involved then. After that call, I started getting messages from other business acquaintances. It turned out that Iris had been calling everyone she considered influential in the Hampton business community, trying to find leverage against EcoClean. She presented herself as a victim of discrimination and unfair treatment. Fortunately, many of these people knew me personally, or through Owen, and preferred to hear my side of the story first. But I realized that Iris would not stop. She would look for any way she could to regain her status. On Wednesday, Michael sent me a preliminary report on the Perry's financial situation, and I was shocked. Their house was mortgaged and remortgaged, their credit cards were racked with massive debts, and Perry's investment portfolio consisted of high-risk assets, many of which had already lost value. According to the documents, Michael explained over the phone, they've been living beyond their means for at least 2 years. Monthly debt payments are eating up almost all of their income. And if interest rates go up a little more, they won't be able to service the mortgage. What about their plans to buy a new villa? I haven't found official documents, but if they did apply for a mortgage, they will almost certainly be turned down. Their debt ratio is already prohibitive. I thanked Michael and wondered. Perry had never been a spender. On the contrary, in his youth, he'd even been overly frugal. Something or someone had changed his attitude toward money, and I suspected I knew who. That same day, I received a message from Perry asking me to meet him, alone, without Iris. We agreed to see each other at a small cafe on the outskirts of town, away from prying eyes. When I arrived, my son was waiting for me. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, a wrinkled shirt, a nervous look. He didn't look like the successful financial analyst he'd always tried to be. Mom, he began after exchanging greetings. We need to talk. The situation with Iris is becoming unbearable. I'm listening. She's obsessed with getting back into marketing. She spends her days calling everyone she knows, trying to find a way to influence you. And at night, she makes a scene accusing me of not being supportive enough. What do you want me to do? I asked calmly. I don't know. He ran his hand through his hair. Maybe find some kind of compromise? Move her to another department, not the lab? Perry, any employee who's unhappy with their position will feel they can pressure the company through their connections. But she's not just any employee. She's your daughter-in-law. It's all the more important that she not get special treatment, I said firmly. Otherwise, I'd be accused of nepotism, only in reverse. Perry stared into his coffee cup. I don't know what to do, he muttered. She's threatening to leave me if I don't make you change your mind. I looked at my son carefully. He had always been a sensitive boy, easily influenced by strong personalities. First it was his father, then it was me, now it was Iris. Perry, the question is, can I ask you a personal question? He nodded without looking up. Are you and Iris in financial trouble? His shoulders tensed, then slumped in defeat. How did you know that? I guessed. Your lifestyle, your plans for a new villa, it doesn't add up to your income. Perry took a deep breath. It's complicated. Iris thinks it's important to impress successful people, that it helps your career, opens doors. We started spending more than we could afford a year ago. At first I thought it was temporary, that I'd soon get a promotion or a bonus. But that didn't happen, I finished for him. Noon and 2. In fact, my company is downsizing right now. I'm afraid I might be on the next layoff list. What about investments? I hear you've invested heavily in risky assets. He looked up at me in surprise. Did you check my finances? I was worried about you, I answered honestly. I guess I was. Perry lowered his head again. Iris introduced me to an investment advisor, Brian Foster. He promised high returns, said it was a unique opportunity. I invested almost all of our savings. And the results? Terrible. The stock is down 70%. And Foster himself isn't answering his cell phone. I stifled a sigh. Classic story. Too good to be true. Perry, why didn't you come to me? I could have helped, given advice. Iris said you were too conservative financially, that the world had changed and your methods were outdated. Now I really sighed. And you believed her over your mother, who had built a multi-million-dollar business from scratch? Perry looked ashamed. I didn't know, Mom. You never told me you still owned EcoClean. I thought you just, well, an old woman living off her dead husband's savings? He nodded without looking at me. Perry, not that you didn't know about my financial situation. I really didn't advertise it. It's that you let assumptions about my status affect the way you feel about me, on how you perceive my advice and experience. I'm sorry, Mom, he said quietly. I messed up, didn't I? Not yet. I reached out and covered his hand with mine. But you need to make a choice. To continue living in the illusionary world Iris had built, or to return to reality. What do you mean? I can help you with your financial problems, but only if you're completely honest with me and willing to listen to my advice, and that could mean some serious changes in your lifestyle. Perry was silent for a long time, clearly struggling with himself. What about Iris? He finally asked. That depends on her. If she's willing to admit her mistakes and change, great. If not, you'll have to decide what's more important to you. Marriage to a woman who's pushing you toward financial ruin or a stable future. Our conversation was interrupted by Perry's phone ringing. He glanced at the screen and wrinkled his nose. It's Iris. She knows I'm seeing you. Answer it, I suggested. I'll hold. He got up from the table and went to the window, answering the phone. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I could tell from my son's tense posture and nervous gestures that it wasn't a pleasant one. When Perry returned, he looked even more exhausted. I have to go, he said. Iris says she's having some kind of crisis. What kind of crisis? I don't know. She didn't explain, just said it was urgent. I nodded, not showing disappointment. Nothing new. Iris was manipulating him, taking him away from an important conversation with me. Fine, go ahead, but think about what I said, and contact me when you're ready to discuss your finances in detail. Perry nodded, kissed me on the cheek and left, leaving me to ponder how deep this crisis went and what I could do to help my son without pandering to his wife. The next day, I decided to take action. Perry's financial problems were more serious than I realized and required intervention. But I also realized that simply offering money would not solve the root of the problem. Something more drastic was needed. I scheduled a meeting with Reed and the legal team to discuss a plan of action. We met in the conference room early in the morning before most of the staff arrived. So, I began, the situation is as follows. My daughter-in-law continues to look for ways to pressure the company through her connections. My son is on the verge of financial ruin because of her exorbitant ambition and wastefulness, and I intend to put a stop to it. What do you suggest? Reed asked. First, I want to organize a corporate event, Something like a celebration of the 25th anniversary of our research department's success. We'll invite key employees, business partners, representatives of the local business community. Sounds good, Helen nodded. But what does this have to do with your sister-in-law? At this event, I'll officially introduce myself as the owner of EcoClean. This will be news to most of the staff, but I think it's time for me to step out of the shadows. Reed looked concerned. Are you sure? You've always preferred to stay on the sidelines. Times change, Reed. Besides, it'll take away Iris's ability to manipulate the situation. Everyone will know she's my daughter-in-law, and her attempts to portray herself as a victim of discrimination will be rendered meaningless. What about your son's financial problems? Jonathan asked. I will prepare a proposal to restructure his debts, but with conditions. He will have to agree to financial supervision by me and to attend money management counseling. Do you think he will agree? Reed asked doubtfully. He won't have a choice unless he wants to lose the house and declare bankruptcy. Besides, I'm his mother. I want to help him without indulging him. We discussed the details of the upcoming event and assigned responsibilities. Then I asked everyone except Reed to leave us alone. There's something else, I said when we were alone. I want you to talk to Irma about Iris. How is she doing in the lab? Not very well as far as I know, Reed answered. She's doing the bare minimum, but she's not enthusiastic. And she's always complaining about the working conditions. Ask Irma to give her a special assignment, something meaningful that will require her full commitment. I want to see how she handles it. A challenge? More like a chance to prove herself. If she's as talented as she claims to be, she'll be able to show it in action, not just words. Reed nodded, understanding my intent. And, I added, invite that lawyer of hers, Branson, to the event. Let him see for himself. The day of the corporate event came sooner than I expected. I woke up early in the morning and stood in front of the mirror for a long time, choosing an outfit. Today I could not afford to look as usual, modest and inconspicuous. Today I had to appear in a role I had avoided all these years, that of the owner of a successful company. In the end, I settled on the elegant navy-colored suit Owen had given me for our last anniversary. A pearl necklace, a thin gold watch, and restrained makeup made me look like a confident businesswoman, not the beggar Iris thought I was. The main conference hall of EcoClean was transformed. Floral arrangements of organic plants, soft lighting, a buffet of local farmers' produce. Reed outdid himself, organizing everything with the elegant simplicity that has always distinguished our brand. By 6 p.m., the room began to fill with guests. Key employees, business partners, members of the local press and Hampton's business community had all come to celebrate the research department's anniversary, unaware of the real purpose of the event. I stood in the corner, observing the guests. Many of them didn't know me by sight. To them, I was just an older woman, perhaps a relative or former employee. That anonymity I'd treasured for years was going to end today. Reed approached me, holding a glass of soft drink. You ready? As ready as I'll ever be, I nodded. Are Perry and Iris here yet? Yeah, they just got here. They're at the buffet table. I looked in that direction and saw my son and daughter-in-law. Perry looked tense, like he was expecting something unpleasant. Iris, on the other hand, seemed relaxed and self-assured. She was dressed in an expensive evening gown, too extravagant for a corporate event of this type. Her high heels clacked across the floor, attracting attention, and around her neck glittered a new necklace that I was sure they couldn't afford. And her lawyer? Over there, talking to Jonathan. Reed nodded toward the tall man in the impeccable suit talking to our lawyer. Good, it's time to get started. Reed stepped up to the small stage and called the guests to attention. He gave a brief but inspiring speech about the achievements of the research department, the importance of innovation and environmental responsibility. The guests applauded politely, not realizing that this was just a prelude to the main event of the evening. And now, Reed continued, I would like to invite a very special person to the stage, the woman without whom EcoClean would not exist, the woman who created the formulas for all of our core products and is still the driving force behind the company. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce Beatrice Harlow, founder and owner of EcoClean. There was silence in the room. Then there were surprised murmurs. Most of the company's employees had never seen me or only knew me as Bee's consultant from the lab. I walked up to the stage, feeling the stares of everyone present, but it was one person's reaction that interested me the most. I found Iris with my eyes and saw her cocky smile replaced with an expression of shock. She grabbed Perry's arm, whispering something fiercely in his ear. My son looked like he wanted to fall through the ground. "Good evening," I began, surprised at how calm my voice sounded. "This is news to many of you, and I understand your surprise. More than 30 years ago, my late husband Owen and I founded EcoClean with a simple idea: to create products that clean effectively but do not harm people or the planet. I gave a brief history of the company, paying tribute to Owen but also emphasizing my role in creating and growing the business. With every word, I could feel my confidence growing. Years spent in the shadows had not diminished my merit and knowledge. All these years, I preferred to stay in the shadows, focusing on developing new formulas and strategic guidance. But today I decided it was time to step into the light, because EcoClean is more than just a business. It's a family legacy that I intend to protect and grow. I shifted my gaze to Iris, who now stood stone-faced, clutching her glass so tightly that her knuckles turned white. "There's one more thing I'd like to mention. As some of you may know, my sister-in-law, Iris Harlow, has recently joined our company." I pointed in her direction, and all heads turned toward her. "She joined us a few months ago, unaware of my connection to the company, and now works in the product testing department." A whisper swept through the room. Now everyone understood why Iris's complaints of discrimination were not being heard in the Hampton business community. "Iris," I addressed her directly, "would you mind joining me on stage?" She froze in place, clearly not expecting this turn. Perry said something quietly, and she took a deep breath and headed toward the stage. Her gait, normally confident, now seemed mechanical, as if she were moving on autopilot. As Iris took the stage, I turned to the audience. "I believe that EcoClean is strong in its people. Every employee, from lab technician to director, contributes to our success. And we always strive to give people a chance to prove themselves, to find their place in the company. That's why I want to address Iris publicly." I turned to my sister-in-law, who was standing next to me, trying to keep her composure. "Iris, according to the department head, your work has been, shall we say, uneven. You've been doing the bare minimum but without the enthusiasm and creativity we value in our employees." Her face reddened with embarrassment and anger, but she remained silent, realizing that any outburst now would backfire on her. "Recently, you were given a special assignment: to develop a new formula for an environmentally friendly stain remover, a task that required not only technical knowledge, but also an understanding of our company's philosophy. And unfortunately, you failed." Now Iris couldn't take it anymore. "It's not fair. I wasn't given enough time. And besides, I'm a marketer, not a chemist." "But you have a master's degree in chemistry," I reminded her gently. "And you worked in a pharmaceutical company lab for 2 years after college, didn't you?" She remained silent, realizing she'd backed herself into a corner. "Iris, the first option is that you publicly admit your mistakes, not just professional, but personal. You admit that you valued status and the trappings of success more than actual achievement, that you judged people based on their appearance and perceived financial status. You then stay with the company, but start in a basic position in the production department. After a year, if you show real progress not only in your work, but also in your attitude toward your coworkers, we'll consider promoting you." I paused for a moment, letting her think about it. "Option 2. You leave the company today. You get the standard severance package, no strings attached, but you should know that your behavior and attitude are already known to many in the Hampton business community. And I'm afraid finding a new position at the marketing director level is going to be problematic." Iris turned pale, then red, her hands clenched into fists. I could see the struggle going on inside her between pride and pragmatism, between the desire to save face and the need to think about the future. "You can't do this to me," she said through gritted teeth. It's humiliating." "More humiliating than calling someone a beggar?" I asked quietly, but so that everyone could hear. "More demeaning than demanding a person be removed from the table because they are not elite?" Shocked gasps sounded. Iris glanced around the room, seeing the judgment on the faces of the people whose respect she was trying so desperately to gain. "It was a misunderstanding," she tried to justify herself. "I didn't know who you were." Does that make this behavior acceptable? I asked. Humiliating people who you don't think have achieved a certain status? Iris couldn't find an answer. Her eyes searched helplessly for Perry, but he stood with his head down, hesitant to meet her gaze. I'm taking the second option, she said at last. I'm leaving the company. I nodded, unsurprised by her decision. Very well. Helen from Human Resources will contact you tomorrow for the necessary paperwork. For now, you're free to go. Iris gave me one last furious look, then turned and walked quickly off the stage. She headed straight for the exit, not even stopping next to Perry. Her high heels thudded loudly on the floor, the last echo of her presence at EcoClean. I turned to the guests. I apologize for this personal moment, but I think it's important to demonstrate the values we proclaim. EcoClean has always put integrity, respect, and real accomplishments above status and ostentatious glitz. And I intend to maintain those principles. Then I moved on to the more positive part of the speech. I announced the company's new projects, the expansion of the product line, and plans to become more environmentally responsible. When I finished, there was a hearty round of applause. When I came down from the stage, I was surrounded by employees. Many of them wanted to meet me personally, express their respect, and ask questions about the future of the company. I answered everyone, feeling strangely relieved that I no longer had to hide. After about an hour, when the initial excitement had subsided a bit, Perry came up to me. He looked lost and depressed. "Mom, we need to talk," he said quietly. I nodded and took him aside to a small office next to the conference room. "Iris is gone," he said as soon as the door closed behind us. "She called a cab and didn't even say goodbye. She just said she didn't want to see me anymore." "I'm sorry about what happened, Perry," I said, and it was the truth. Despite everything that had happened, he was my son, and his pain was hurting me too. "Did he?" He looked at me questioningly. "That's what you wanted, isn't it? Humiliate her publicly, destroy our marriage?" "No, Perry," I shook my head. "I was seeking justice. Iris humiliated me publicly, for no reason other than her own arrogance. She manipulated you into financial ruin. She lied about her accomplishments at the company. All I did was give her a choice: admit her mistakes and start over, or walk away and face the consequences of her actions." "She chose to leave," Perry said quietly. "Yes, and that says more about her character than anything else. Pride was more important to her than her future, yours and her own." Perry sank back in his chair, covering his face with his hands. "What am I supposed to do now? My house is mortgaged, my credit cards are maxed out, my investments are worthless." "You have a choice," I said, sitting down next to him. "Just like Iris did, you can admit your mistakes, accept my help on my terms, and start over. Or you can continue living in a world of illusions until you're completely broke." "What are the terms?" he asked, looking up at me. "First, you sell the house. It's too big and expensive for your real needs. I'll help you find something more reasonable. But this is my house. It's a debt hole, Perry. You can't afford to keep it, especially now that your job is in jeopardy." He sighed, but didn't argue. "Second, I'll pay off your credit card debts, but you close all but one account, with a reasonable limit and only for necessary spending." "Okay," he nodded. "Third, you'll attend financial planning counseling weekly for at least 6 months, and you'll give me a monthly report of your spending." "You don't trust me?" There was resentment in his voice. "It's not about trust, Perry. It's about forming new habits. You've been living beyond your means for too long. It takes time to learn to manage money responsibly." He was silent for a long time, considering my words. Then he nodded. "I agree. I don't have a choice, do I?" "There are always choices," I said softly. "It's just that some choices lead to a better future than others." "What about your job if I get downsized?" "I have an offer," I said. "Not at EcoClean. I'm not a family man in business. But I have connections in the financial sector. There's a company that does environmentally responsible investments. They're looking for an analyst with your experience." "You've already thought of everything," he smiled weakly. "I'm your mother, Perry. Of course I've thought of everything." He sighed, then suddenly hugged me for the first time in a long time. I'm so sorry, Mom, for everything. For the way I let Iris treat you, for not valuing your advice, for being so blind. I hugged him back, feeling something inside me thaw. But I also knew that full forgiveness wouldn't come right away. I know, son, and we're working on it, one step at a time. By the time we got back to the conference room, the event was winding down. Most of the guests had left, leaving only the key employees and a few close business associates. Reed approached me with a glass of champagne. "It went even better than we expected," he said. "The employees are thrilled to finally meet the real boss. And Branson, Iris's lawyer, has already withdrawn the lawsuit. Said that, in light of the new circumstances, he didn't think further action was appropriate." "Great," I nodded. "Then we can move on." "What are your plans now?" Reed asked. "Are you going to stay in the shadows or take a more active role in management?" I wondered. For years, I'd been content with my low profile. But tonight showed me that sometimes you have to step into the light to protect what you hold dear. "I think it's time for a change," I said. "I'm not going to become the public face of the company that's still your role. But I will be more openly involved in strategic decisions. And maybe I'll start a new project, an educational center for women entrepreneurs. I will share the experience I have accumulated over the years." "That sounds great," Reed smiled. "The world would definitely benefit from more Beatrice Harlow." A week after the corporate event, I was sitting in my garden, enjoying the morning sunshine and a cup of tea. A lot had changed in those days. Iris, as I suspected, had failed to find a job in the Hamptons and had left for New York without even saying goodbye to Perry. He has begun the process of selling the house and has already attended his first financial planning consultation. There were changes at EcoClean too. I started showing up at the office more often, getting to know the staff, and attending meetings. Many were surprised to discover that the consultant B they had known for years was actually the owner of the company. My life changed as well. I still favored modesty and simplicity, but I stopped hiding my success. After all, there's no shame in being proud of your life's work. The phone rang. Perry. He called every day, talking about his success in getting his finances in order, asking for advice. We were slowly rebuilding a relationship that had been shattered by years of misunderstandings and other people's influence. "Mom," he said after exchanging greetings, "I got a job offer from that company you recommended. They want me to start next month." "That's wonderful, Perry," I said, genuinely pleased. "One more thing. I found an apartment. It's nothing fancy, but it's clean, in a good neighborhood, and affordable. I'm proud of you," I said. "It's a big step." "It's all thanks to you, Mom. If you hadn't stepped in, you would have figured it out sooner or later," I said softly. "You're a smart boy, Perry. Always have been. You just lost your way temporarily." After talking to my son, I went back to my thoughts. Life went on, and there was more to come. New products for EcoClean, an educational center for women entrepreneurs, helping Perry rebuild his life. I didn't know what the future would bring, but I was sure of one thing. I would no longer hide in the shadows. Not out of vanity or a hunger for recognition, but because sometimes you need to step into the light to protect what you hold dear and help those in need. And if that requires revealing your secret, well, so be it. After all, real strength is not in hiding your success, but in using it for good.